We have to cut out 2.5 minutes of dialogue. Rob Reiner was light years ahead of everyone with what to do.
It wasn't the statement anyone expected when serious concerns first started buzzing around. The industry braced itself for the usual move: polished language, careful wording, and a neat request for privacy. That's the standard playbook everyone saw coming. But that's not what happened. What came next blindsided people completely. Sally Struthers didn't roll out a scripted response or hide behind PR lines. What she shared felt raw, unfiltered, and almost too personal to hear. The kind of moment that makes you stop and think, should we even be listening to this? This wasn't a former co-star chasing attention. This was someone who grew up alongside Rob on All in the Family, someone whose bond with him never cracked even after the cameras shut off. Sally wasn't looking back with nostalgia. She was letting go of emotional weight that had been piling up quietly for months. And what she hinted at shook the narrative in a way that felt deeply unsettling. Her words lined up with private worries already floating among people close to Rob. Not accusations, not proof, just worry. Real, heavy worry that something unhealthy may have been going on behind closed doors. Sally made it clear she stayed silent for a long time, not because she didn't care, but because she did. She said she was trying to protect Rob's dignity, and that silence, she admitted, was painful. According to her, the moment she finally spoke came when staying quiet started to feel more dangerous than telling the truth. She referenced concerns involving Nick, Rob's son, stressing clearly these were concerns, not legal claims. Her voice, she said, wasn't just sad, it was tight with frustration and fear. Then came the line that froze the room dead silent. Her exact words were, "We all saw the bruises on his soul, but we were too afraid to ask about the bruises on his arms." That sentence landed heavy, and everyone felt it at once. It wasn't literal, it wasn't an allegation, it was emotional language, a raw way of describing the pain and distress people could feel but didn't know how to confront. Sally made that clear right away. She wasn't pointing fingers, she was describing something deeper, something visible without being spoken. She then talked about a lunch she shared with Rob just weeks earlier, the last time she saw him face to face. She said he didn't look like the fiery, outspoken director people remembered. Something was off. He seemed withdrawn, smaller somehow, constantly checking his phone and reacting every time it buzzed like he was bracing for bad news. When she finally asked if something was wrong, his response stayed with her. He looked exhausted, overwhelmed, and quietly afraid. This quote remains unchanged. "I don't know how to stop him, Sal. I love him, but I'm terrified of him at the time." That moment shook her deeply. At first, she assumed he meant pressure, politics, industry stress, outside forces closing in. She didn't imagine anything darker. Not until later conversations started lining up dots she couldn't ignore anymore. She stressed again she wasn't accusing anyone of crimes. What she described was emotional fear, the kind that slowly eats away at someone from the inside. And she wasn't alone. Similar concerns were quietly echoed by others who cared about Rob. That's when Tom Cruise's name entered the conversation, not as an accuser, but as someone who had known Rob closely for decades. Their bond from A Few Good Men was personal, not just professional. Insiders say Tom noticed changes long before anything went public. Nothing here has been confirmed, no official accusations exist, but according to multiple anonymous sources, Tom didn't just hear rumors, he allegedly witnessed something firsthand that shook him enough to act. Those same sources claim that back in November, Tom arranged a quiet, private intervention, using a future project as the excuse. What he reportedly walked into was tense and emotionally charged. The focus wasn't on Rob, but on Nick. Voices were raised, emotions were boiling over, the air felt heavy, and everyone in the room could feel it. There were no claims of physical violence, just intensity, the kind that shakes people to their core. What stood out most was this: Tom Cruise, known for calm control, allegedly stepped in to de-escalate the situation, not theatrically, not for show, instinctively. Later, according to second-hand accounts, Tom privately described Nick's demeanor as deeply unsettling, empty, unpredictable, and hard to read. These were reactions, not diagnoses. Sources say Tom pulled Rob aside that same day and spoke to him directly, with no sugarcoating. What was said stays private, but people close to the situation say that conversation changed everything. According to multiple sources, Tom Cruise's warning to Rob Reiner was blunt and unforgettable. He allegedly told him, "You are not safe in this house. You need to get him out, or you need to get out." That sentence reportedly stayed with Rob long after Tom left. Think about the weight of that moment. A man who has lived through pressure, chaos, and power at the highest level felt shaken enough to tell a close friend to leave his own home, not because of rumors or image, but because of fear. What followed, according to those close to Rob, was painfully familiar. Rob didn't explode, he didn't deny what was happening, he defended his child. Sources say Rob answered with words many parents use in desperate moments. "He's sick, we can't abandon him, he just needs one more chance." It wasn't weakness, it was love, but love mixed with denial can quietly turn dangerous. Sally Struthers later echoed this same pattern without realizing how closely it matched what others had seen. She spoke emotionally about Rob's endless forgiveness, admitting she now wonders if it worked against him. She didn't blame Rob, she blamed herself. She said she wished she had pushed harder, spoken louder, and refused to accept the explanations that kept coming. Over time, she noticed Rob pulling away. Plans were canceled, calls went unanswered, even longtime friends from All in the Family. The distance didn't arrive with drama, it crept in quietly. Isolation settled in slowly. A small group of cast members reportedly tried to organize a casual reunion dinner. Rob declined without explanation. Sally said that hurt more than she expected. Then she shared a moment that stayed with people. About a week later, she drove by Rob's house, not to intrude, just to check. It was daytime, but every blind was closed. The house felt sealed off, less like a home, more like a fortress. She texted Rob to say she was nearby. Hours passed before he replied. His message was short. "Not a good time. He's home." Just 2 words. At the time, it sounded like scheduling. Now those words feel heavier. "He's home" didn't sound like drama, it sounded like a warning. What stunned people even more was what Sally shared next. She revealed that Rob's finances were quietly unraveling, not because of bad investments or career trouble, but because he was trying to keep a situation from exploding. She didn't cite documents, she described exhaustion, fear, a man constantly putting out fires no one else could see. According to her, Rob had been selling off assets to cover debts tied to Nick's ongoing struggles. Sally also spoke carefully about an incident that still unsettles her. Months earlier, Rob suffered a serious fall down the stairs. The explanation was simple, an accident. He broke his wrist and had visible bruising. No one questioned it.
But when Sally visited him in the hospital, something felt off. She said the bruising didn't match what she expected from a fall. Not proof, a feeling, a quiet moment that wouldn't leave her. She asked him directly, not accusing, just asking. Rob didn't answer. He looked away. Then he cried. No confirmation, no denial, just silence. And that silence, she said, was louder than any words. Sources say Tom Cruise tried again. He reportedly offered to pay for an intensive rehabilitation program designed for extreme cases. Nick refused, and Rob couldn't bring himself to force it. Love, guilt, and hope twisted together. Later, Tom allegedly told friends it felt like watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion. He could see exactly where it was heading, but he couldn't stop it. Sally closed with a blunt truth that hit hard. Hollywood protects its own until silence becomes impossible. People didn't want to believe that someone as respected as Rob Reiner could be living in fear. It shattered the image, and in this town, image is everything. Silence doesn't erase reality, it only delays it. And at this point, Sally Struthers said she's done caring who feels uncomfortable. At 77, after losing her brother and watching people she loved suffer quietly, she made one thing clear: she's finished protecting reputations that never protected the people behind them. Sally said she's done with industry politics. What she wants now is accountability. She openly criticized what she described as a long chain of enablers around Nick. Not criminals, not monsters, but people who looked the other way. Friends who kept showing up when they shouldn't have. Professionals who, in her view, failed to act when warning signs were flashing. She didn't accuse anyone of crimes. She accused the system of negligence, of endless chances without real boundaries. She spoke bluntly about how a famous last name can soften consequences, how warnings replace action, how problems get delayed instead of stopped. Then, Sally shifted the focus to Michelle Reiner, saying most people completely misunderstood her role. Rob was visible. Michelle was the buffer, the mediator, the one constantly stepping in before situations boiled over. The most chilling thing Sally shared was deeply personal. She said Michelle once admitted she had started sleeping with her bedroom door locked. Think about that, locking your door inside your own home, not from strangers, but from fear you can't even say out loud. Michelle reportedly told Sally, "I wake up to footsteps in the hall and my heart stops." That wasn't chaos once in a while, that was constant anxiety. Sally described Rob and Michelle as prisoners in their own home, trapped not by walls, but by love, fear, and denial. They poured everything into trying to keep things together. By the end, there was nothing left. According to Sally, investigators later shared the final incident wasn't sudden. It didn't explode in one moment. It built slowly, like a siege, over several days. Tension escalated instead of easing. Neighbors reportedly heard raised voices on and off, not enough to call emergency services, just enough to feel wrong. And here's the uncomfortable truth Sally pointed out. In places like Brentwood, people don't rush to call police on famous neighbors. They turn up the TV, they mind their business, they assume someone else will step in. Sally said Rob did make a call that night, but not to police. He reportedly contacted a private security company instead, a request for help, not punishment. A response was logged, a team was dispatched, but timing mattered, delay mattered. People close to Rob believe he likely minimized the danger during that call. Even then, he didn't want Nick treated like a criminal. He didn't want handcuffs. He just wanted the situation calmed down. There's something deeply human and devastating about that instinct. Sally said Rob never stopped being a father, not for 1 second. According to what she was told, he focused on de-escalation until the very end. That image, a man known for standing loudly for justice, choosing love over self-protection, forces uncomfortable questions about family, fear, and silence as legal narratives begin forming. Sally made one final plea. She begged the public not to let history be rewritten. She fears Rob and Michelle will be painted as villains who can no longer speak. She was blunt. Rob's greatest flaw wasn't cruelty, it was softness. He was too forgiving, too patient, too hopeful. And according to people close to the situation, Tom Cruise may be prepared to testify, not out of anger, but because he believes the truth must be locked into the record. He wants the warnings acknowledged. He wants it known that help was offered. Because this, Sally insists, was not a breakdown, it was a buildup. That brings us to the most uncomfortable part of this story, the part people avoid saying out loud. Sally was clear, this didn't start overnight. She reminded everyone that we all watched Nick grow up in public. Red carpets, smiling photos, headlines painting him as the lucky kid. But according to Sally, the warning signs were there long before adulthood. She said even as a teenager, Nick made people uneasy. Not loud trouble, quiet trouble, the kind that sits behind the eyes. She shared a story from years ago at a rap party that still unsettles her. Nick was found alone in a back room, calmly destroying property, not raging, not crying, just methodically breaking things one by one. When Rob confronted him, Sally said Nick didn't panic, he didn't apologize, he smiled. A smile, she said, chilled her to the bone. That night, she claims she pulled Rob aside and urged him to get serious help immediately. And to be fair, she acknowledged that Rob and Michelle did exactly that. Doctors, specialists, treatment programs, every resource money could provide. But then Sally said something that hit hard. You can't fix everything with resources. You can't buy empathy. You can't write a check that guarantees accountability. Since her interview aired, the reaction inside the industry has been telling. People who once posed beside Nick are quietly distancing themselves. Photos disappearing, connections fading, invitations rewritten. The retreat has begun. Sally isn't backing away. She says she has nothing left to protect. No favors, no politics, no image to manage. Just the truth as she lived it. She wants people to understand that Rob Reiner wasn't just a famous man who died under tragic circumstances. He was someone living under constant emotional strain inside his own home. We struggle to imagine powerful men as vulnerable. We assume money equals control, that he could have forced distance, that he could have fixed it. But Sally said love freezes action. Love delays hard decisions. Love convinces you tomorrow will be different. As for the funeral, sources say it will be intensely private. No spectacle, no statements. Tom Cruise is reportedly assisting quietly behind the scenes, focused on privacy and security, not drama. Even now, Sally believes Rob deserves peace. She also revealed she has written one final letter to Rob, a conversation they never finished at that lunch weeks before everything unraveled. She hasn't shared its contents, only that it says what was left unsaid. And that leads to the hardest lesson of all. We're raised on stories, many directed by Rob himself, that tell us love fixes everything, that patience and forgiveness always win. But real life isn't a movie. Sometimes love isn't enough to save someone who refuses help, and sometimes trying to save them costs everything. Sally didn't speak out for attention. She spoke out to give Rob something he didn't have at the end: honesty. He wasn't a legend. He wasn't a director. He was a father, scared, exhausted, heartbroken. And by saying that, she gave him his humanity back.